Hey guys, I hope you're all having a really great day. It's December 31st, so you know what that means. It is time for my top books of 2013. So I decided that I would just stick with a nice round number and do the top 10 books of 2013. In the number 13 slot, I have put Coraline by Neil Gaiman. This was a book that I read very early on in the year, probably like the second or third book I read this year, and I loved it. It was the first Neil Gaiman book I ever read. It's a children's book, which is really great. It's kind of what interested me in more children's literature, and it's just fantastic. The writing style is beautiful. It follows a girl named Coraline. She and her family move into a new house. One day when she's exploring, she discovers kind of an alternate universe that is her house and her family, but not, kind of. And the other mother really wants Coraline to stay and be in this alternate universe with them, and Coraline is desperate to get back to her real parents, and it's really adventurous, and it's a really tiny book, but there was a lot of adventure packed into that amount of pages, and I just really loved it. If you have never read Neil Gaiman before, Coraline is an excellent place to start because it's easy to read, it's adventurous, it's fun, it's funny, it's creepy, it's got everything that a good children's book needs with a little bit of that Neil Gaiman twist in there. So I highly recommend it if you haven't ever read it. The number 9 slot on my list goes to Every Day by David Levithan. If you have been watching my videos for the past couple of months, you know that I have recently developed the biggest love for David Levithan, an interest in David Levithan that I never ever thought that I could ever have. He's an incredible author. He writes characters that are completely realistic, completely relatable, completely easy to read about, and I loved it. I loved Every Day. It follows the story of A, who wakes up in a different person's body every morning. One day, A wakes up in the body of Justin and then proceeds to fall in love with Justin's girlfriend. And it is a love story about the two of them, and it's just really good. It definitely deserved to make this list. The number 8 slot on my list goes to How to Love by Katie Catuno. This is a YA contemporary romance about a girl named Rena who has been in love with her friend Sawyer Legrand, I believe, for basically her entire life. They begin a relationship, and then Sawyer just picks up and leaves one night without a trace, no word, nothing. And then after he leaves, Rena finds out that she is pregnant. And then the story kind of picks up a couple years later when Sawyer returns to their hometown, and they kind of fall in love all over again, and it is incredibly sweet. It's told in alternating chapters between the past and the present, and it is just a really great YA contemporary, and it had an interesting spin on it because it kind of addressed an issue of teen pregnancy as well as abandonment and loss. There's some really sad parts in it, and it's just an all-around really great YA contemporary. If you haven't read it, I highly recommend it. It just came out this year, and it is definitely worth it. Number 7 is surprisingly the only dystopian book on this list, and it is Never Fade by Alexandra Bracken. This is the sequel to The Darkest Minds, and it is so good. It is about a young girl named Ruby who lives in a dystopian society where a disease outbreak killed most of the children, and those that survived ended up having these weird abilities, and the government just rounded up all the kids and put them in these concentration camps, basically. And the story follows Ruby after she escapes one of the camps, and it is kind of a road trip combined with the dystopian. There's tons of action. It is super fast-paced. That's the first book. The second book is even better. It is amazing. It's, again, super fast-paced. It's not so much road trippy, but it is incredible. I also read The Darkest Minds this year, and obviously I loved it too, but for some reason Never Fade was just so good. I thought it was so much better than The Darkest Minds, and that's very rare for me to like a sequel more than the original book, but it happened, and I loved it. And if you haven't checked out the Darkest Minds trilogy, I highly, highly, highly recommend it. You won't regret it. It's amazing. I believe the third book comes out later in 2014, and I cannot wait. It's gonna be great. Number 6 on my list is Norwegian Wood by Haruki Murakami. This was my first Murakami book, and it was incredible. I have heard so many amazing things about Murakami, and I had some pretty high expectations for this book, and it absolutely met them 100%. It was amazing. It is about a guy named Toru who falls in love with a girl named Naoko, and it is a very tragic story of their romance, the ups and downs of their somewhat relationship, and it's so good. It's kind of a coming of age, discovering yourself, and it is incredible. The writing is overwhelmingly beautiful at times, and sometimes I just had to put it down because it was just so good. The writing was so great that it was too much. I definitely recommend this book. If you've never read anything by Murakami, I think that this is a really great place to start. It was the perfect book for me to start with, I think. It's just really good. And obviously I loved it because it is in my top 10 books of 2013, so definitely check it out if you are interested in Murakami. The number 5 slot goes to a very recent edition, and it is Attachments by Rainbow Rowell. I loved this book. It is a really great adult contemporary romance. It's so good. It's about this guy named Lincoln who gets this job at a newspaper doing internet technology. His job is to monitor the company emails and make sure that nobody is sending in any inappropriate emails to each other on their work computers. And he begins to read the email exchanges between these two women, Jennifer and Beth, and even though he knows he's not supposed to, he just continues to read them, and he ends up falling in love with one of them, and it is incredible. It is incredibly adorable. Like, I've never read a book that is that adorable ever, and I loved it. I absolutely loved it, and I definitely recommend it if you like contemporary romance, because it is definitely a contemporary romance. The number 4 slot goes to another children's book, and it is A Monster Calls by Patrick Ness. I read this back in the summer, and I absolutely loved it. It was incredible. It is about a boy named Connor whose mother is dying from what I only assumed was cancer. He gets visited by this monster who tells him stories, and he thinks that he's going to be able to save his mother, and so that's kind of what keeps him going, and it's just absolutely incredible. It's really, really sad. I bawled. Obviously, you know, it is a really sad book, but it's so good, and something that aids in my love for this book is the absolutely breathtaking illustrations that accompany the story. The illustrations alone are enough for me to give the book 5 stars, but the story is also really good. Patrick Ness has a very, very wonderful writing style, and I'm looking forward to reading more of his books in 2014. In the number 3 slot, we have The Lover's Dictionary by David Levithan. This was the first David Levithan book that I ever read, and it was so good. It is a love story told in a series of dictionary entries, and they are not chronological. You kind of have to piece them together, and also there's a few like holes, you know, or things left up to interpretation that aid in the reading experience, and I really loved it. It's just a really good book. It's a really quick read. I think I read it in about an hour and a half, and it's incredible. If you've never read anything by David Levithan, I highly recommend it. It's an easy, quick, enjoyable, lovable, wonderful read, and it definitely deserves the number 3 slot on my list. Number 2 on my list is a book that I actually had previously read and then reread this year and found out that I loved it even more the second time around, and it is How I Live Now by Meg Rossoff. It is about a young girl named Daisy who goes to England to visit her cousins, and while she's over there, World War III breaks out and she is unable to get home. And her aunt gets stuck in another country as well, so it is just her and her 4 cousins kind of running the farm on their own. And she falls in love with one of her cousins, which is kind of weird, but given the circumstances of the story, it is kind of acceptable, and it's just really good. It's not, you know, your typical romance, it's not your typical book, but it's really good. it's very short. It's less than 200 pages, but in those 200 pages, you just get pulled through all the emotions that you could ever possibly feel, and it's just an absolutely wonderful book. And I was so surprised that I liked it so much more the second time around, but I think because I knew kind of what was coming, that I was able to enjoy the story more and kind of appreciate it more. So I'm so glad that I decided to pick it up again, and it is a book that will probably remain in my top books of all time forever because it's just really good. And finally, the book that you guys have all been waiting for, my absolute favorite book of 2013. It is Jellico Road by Melina Marchetta. This book, guys, man, it's one of those books that, you know, when I finished reading it, I loved it and I gave it 5 out of 5 stars immediately, but I don't think that I fully appreciated my love for this book until now. Honestly, you know, I read it like 4 months ago and I cannot stop thinking about it. I think about it all the time. I think about the characters, I think about the story, I think about everything. And it's just a really incredible book. It is about a girl named Taylor who goes to a boarding school in Australia. She kind of forms this really deep connection with a girl named Hannah who lives and works at the school. And then there is also this alternate storyline about these 5 friends who meet and kind of get in trouble together in the same kind of area. And while reading the book, you know, you don't really know what's coming. You don't know what's going to happen. Like in my case, I couldn't really predict what was going to happen, but reading and trying to piece it together is like the most fun part of the book. When I got to the end and I saw how the 2 storylines connected and interweaved and how great they were and how wonderful the whole book was, you know, I was like, this book, man, this book is so good. And out of every single book on this list, if I could recommend you one book to like go home and read right now, it would be Jellico Road, because it is just an incredible book. It is definitely my favorite of the year. And if you can't tell, I love this book, and it'll be in my top books of all time forever because it's incredible. Okay guys, so those are my top 10 books of 2013. It's been a really, really great year. I can't believe that 2013 is over and tomorrow will be 2014. It is insane, but yeah, it's a great year, and I look forward to an even better year in 2014. Let me know in the comments what some of your favorite books this year were. Let me know if you've read any of the books that I mentioned and what you thought about them, and I will see you guys in the new year. Bye!